Yeah, the storm's coming right over our head. About the, well, something I hadn't thought about anyway, which was the lack of education for medical professionals, because unless the schools are teaching this, right, they're not going to know. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Counselor, how are you?
Oh, you're on mute.
Hello,
Check 1,
how
2.
are you? Donnie's just, I'm using Donnie Spencer's computer, so he's just putting in my name here.
Wonderful. I hear you're going from event to event to event today, so we really appreciate your time.
Yeah, I'm actually in Lebanon, just looking at a housing project here, affordable housing project here, and so we're at a library in Lebanon here with some space. But
Cinde,
thank
I
you.
really do appreciate you. I appreciate you fitting us into your schedule. I know it's also a challenge because I'm trying to get all my board and match it with your schedule. So I think let's see if we're waiting for one more, Dr. Riley Kirk. So
Cindy, just so you know, we have a storm going overhead, so if anybody glitches out, it could just be that. Okay.
And
those of
that's an
you,
important topic, so I'm glad that you arranged this time for us to talk.
well, thank you. So what I'd like to do, just remind everybody, we are recording this. What I'll do is I'll have all my board members quickly introduce themselves and then give you an opportunity to sort of introduce yourself and expand if you want in terms of, your focus on cannabis and policy and other gubernatorial policies. And then we have the questions that we sent in advance. So let's start with our introductions. We'll start with Riley. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello. My name is Riley. I have a PhD in pharmaceutical sciences. I'm a cannabis educator and a cannabis researcher. I teach at the University of Rhode Island, but I also teach on social media and in live events to make sure that the cannabis community and medical professionals are educated on cannabis and the endocannabinoid system. And I'll keep it at that for now.
And those of you, I think there's only one that's not, those of you that are New Hampshire residents, just tell them what town you're from.
Oh, okay. I'm in New Hampshire.
She's from Lancaster. Joe?
Hi, my name is Joe Hannon. I'm a retired doctor, former state rep. I was a member of the 2018 Commission to Study the Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana, they called it at the time. And I've done a lot of work with harm reduction and the recovery community over the last several years. I was one of the people co-sponsors of the naloxone legislation, and I helped basically helped organize and push through syringe exchange legislation, got that passed, and then got it started and up and running. So thanks for being here.
Thank you. Carrie?
Hello, my name is Carrie DeGudis. I sit on the board to represent the patients of the state as best as I can. I work closely with at least Granite Leaf Dispensary, working on the others soon. Over the past year or so, I've worked and created a group called the New Hampshire Cannabis Communication Group, which is successful in many ways. I've brought in multiple people, professionals, patients, and otherwise to gather a collaborative opinion of, current up-to-date cannabis policy, how patients are doing, et cetera. Just making sure everybody is communicating properly and receiving, hopefully, the best they can do to get the care they receive.
Thank you. Jim?
Yeah, hi, Cindy. Jim Riddle. I'm Hillsborough. I've been a farmer and involved in agriculture and ag policy all my life. I currently have a small seed business called Lamb's Breath Seeds. I sell cannabis seeds, which I started after I learned that the DEA ruled that any cannabis seeds are hemp because they don't contain THC. So I grow the plants. Because I'm in New Hampshire, I have to destroy all the cannabinoids, save the seeds, and sell those. But yeah, I'm very anxious for New Hampshire to join our neighboring states in the 21st century.
Also, I'm sorry, I'm from New Hampshire, Manchester, New Hampshire. My apologies.
And speaking of neighboring states, Phil?
Yes, hi, Cindy. My name is Phil Lamy. I'm from Castleton, Vermont. I'm a professor of sociology at the Vermont State University, and I'm the director of our Cannabis Studies Certificate Program. And I got involved in New Hampshire through Tim Egan, who teaches in our system and currently teaches our Cannabis course. So I'm very interested in education at all levels, I think, as we all are here. And nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Daryl?
Pleasure to meet you, Cinde. So Daryl Eames, I'm in Manchester, New Hampshire, originally from the North Country. I founded the New Hampshire Cannabis Association 6+ years ago when I thought we were going to get legalization. In my naivete, I didn't realize our Senate had been murdering every bill that came across its desk. Around the same time, I also founded another company, so I act as a consultant, matching cannabis, hemp, and CBD companies with sources of capital and credit card processing, among other services. So thank you for being here. Really interested in the conversation today.
Right. And as you know, many of things of me, Cinde, specifically to this, so I'm the chair of the board for NHCann. When I was asked by Representative Brendan Cushing to chair the House Democratic Cannabis Caucus in 2019, I was very involved in creating legislation for 3 years. When I wasn't reelected, Daryl asked me to help expand the board. Those are all these folks here. I currently teach with Phil. It's my 3rd year teaching at Vermont State University in the Cannabis Studies program. I've been with the university for over 10 years teaching business and communications. And I also work nationally with the Cannabis Certification Council, which is an organization that promotes sustainability in the cannabis industry. And I do that all from my lovely home in Sugar Hill. So that's our group here today. There's a couple board members who couldn't join us, who we will share the video with. So please tell everybody who you are if they don't already know, but and maybe talk a little bit about who you are from your sort of cannabis, medicinal, adult recreational marijuana topic.
Sure. So I'm Cinde Warmington, Executive Counselor for District 2, and for the last 4 years have been the only Democrat on New Hampshire's Executive Council. I guess a little bit of background about me is probably helpful. So I have a bachelor's degree in medical technology and worked in healthcare for about 20 years as a phlebotomist, and then as a laboratory technologist, and then in all sorts of roles in hospital business administration for many years. And then went on to law school and became a healthcare attorney, chaired the health law section at Shaheen and Gordon. And, throughout all of that, was often involved in issues having to do with patients' rights, patients' access to medication, and became a firm advocate for the legalization of marijuana, both as a result of that and as a result of the work that I saw being done around defending people who were in possession of cannabis. Particularly disturbing to me at the time was how many of our young people were being convicted of cannabis-related possession, and as a result of that, losing access to their student loans. Seemed completely, you lose access to your carry space, but you lose access to your student loans as a result of those convictions. And so became a real advocate for initially for the decriminalization, but was always an advocate for the legalization. And the way that played out for me was I was the chair of the New Hampshire Democratic Party's platform committee. I was on the committee in 2008. I think I started chairing it in 2010 or 12, and I was the chair until after I joined the Executive Council in 2020. And throughout that whole process, just working to change the platform to really reflect what I felt was we were hearing all across the state. I mean, Democrats all across the state have been wanting the legalization of marijuana for a very long time. And I guess a little bit surprisingly to me was how much resistance we would face from elected officials in particular. And so it was a difficult dance to do over the years, but did manage to get decriminalization into the platform, and then very proudly managed to get it, the legalization of marijuana as into our democratic platform in 2017. And worked with Rennie, worked with Paul Toomey on that. And so have just been a real advocate for access to cannabis for many, many years. I do not proclaim to be an expert at all on policy. Instead, in fact, just listening to all of you tell me about your backgrounds, I know there's a lot more knowledge on this phone call from your side of the table than from mine. And I think we have set aside, I think, an hour for this conversation. And I think probably the best use of our time is for this to be a conversation, because I'm happy to share with you what my thoughts are, but I think that all of you probably can educate and illuminate the topic for me. And I look forward to that. I am running for governor now, as many of you probably know, on the executive council. I am in the executive branch of government. We see everything that comes through the executive branch. I know every agency in the state, what programs are working, what programs are not working, what the opportunities are right in front of us. And that I am really focused, as many of you might know, on reproductive freedom, on public education, on the environment, on affordable housing. But my roots are in healthcare, and they always have been in healthcare, with 40 years of experience in healthcare, and making sure that everyone in the Granite State has access to the healthcare they need, and including access to cannabis for medical purposes. So I'm happy to have that conversation today. I'm really glad to be with you.
Tim might have froze.
I think Tim frozen.
My talk was so compelling that
He's not sleeping. He's not sleeping.
We joke that the next bill that we need to see is get good internet for Tim Egan and Sugar.
All right. Well, I want to tell you how hard I worked on that, because I represent Sugar Hill, and the fact that the access to broadband across our state is a huge issue for me, and in my district in particular, because I represent a lot of Grafton and a lot of Cheshire. And we have a lot of money right now coming into the state for broadband. This is once in a lifetime money, waiting for him to unfreeze. But this is once in a lifetime money, and we need to make sure that every single community gets connected. Every single location gets connected. I'm likening this to when we did electricity across our country, right? We're not going to see this kind of money again. And this is our chance. There are places that we need to take broadband that will never be economically feasible for the private sector to do it.
Well, if we could put a tower right next to his house, we'd appreciate that. Until he gets back.
Carrie, I don't know if he stays in the same spot for that long, so it even matters, actually.
So, Carrie, why don't you go ahead and share your question with Cindy, and we'll get started until Tim can log back on.
Surely, no problem. I just want, again, wonderful to meet you, and thank you for coming to this panel. Pardon me a second. Okay, as a patient, I have experienced significant stigma and limited access to resources. How would you, as governor, improve access to medical cannabis, support alternative treatment centers, and that part is very important, and ensure my rights as a patient are protected? Also, that was very important. Some of those things were threatened recently, and I know a lot of the patient community was really reaching out to me, pretty much left and right. We were pretty frightened. So how would you protect our rights in that matter?
Yeah. Okay. Well, first, can you just tell me what the threat was, the recent threat?
Well, when they were going through with it, they were taking down, Abbas was taking down the strength of THC, which was, when I heard that, I think I flipped out, because me as a patient, if I take that for anxiety and and pain, which I'm sorry if I'm going like this a lot today, I actually have pain. So good example. But when you take down the strength of the THC, that means that, let's just say I'm smoking. There's many different ways you could use it, but if I'm smoking, that means that I need to smoke 2 to 3 times as much. That means I need to I need to spend 2 to 3 times more. And I also am doing more damage to my lungs. That's not the route I use, but if that were the example, that can't happen. And that was pretty scary for me and, the other patients. And so forth. The other things they're intending to do were, raise prices, put a tax and or fee for the patients, et cetera, et cetera. It was pretty frightening to think to go backwards. And I just don't want that to happen again. And that's what I need to make sure for the patients of the state and myself, that that's not at risk again.
Yeah, okay. So I would be obviously opposed to any kind of restrictions on the access to what the medical community considers is medically appropriate for medical cannabis. And that should be our guide there. And to me, I think that when you look at the legalization of marijuana, the threat to the ATCs is, of course, that once recreational cannabis is available, there are many people who will no longer seek a medical card. They will simply buy their cannabis product, from an authorized seller. And so the market for the medical cannabis products will shrink, or likely will shrink, because of that. And it creates even more, I think, of a threat to the situation that you're describing, where you need a high level of THC in the product. And now you have a situation where the market may not be as financially, economically viable for the ATC. So I certainly think that in the first instance, that we should make sure that the ATCs can participate in the sale of recreational cannabis products, so that they can also compete and certainly keep any regulations off of them with respect to limiting the THC levels. I actually, this is probably not the norm, but I actually know of situations where people are looking for low levels of THCs that they obtain through medical cannabis providers, the ATCs, and that's for sleep, and they don't really want those high levels, and you can't, they can't buy that product in the recreational space. And so it kind of maybe a not common, but also a place where we want to protect the ATCs and put them in a situation that they are most protected economically to survive. And I also just want to say that all of the ATCs that have been operating in the state now for 5 years or so there haven't been problems, right? We have not seen the kinds of concerns that people had expressed. They've been very successful at that, and it seems to me a very good place to start with the production of recreational cannabis as well. Although I know we're going to get to this, but restrictions on growing in the ATCs, I think is an issue we need to talk about. I know we're going to get to that in another question, so I won't elaborate on that. So have I addressed your concern? I just want to say everything I do has always come from the perspective of the patient, right? Healthcare is my life, right? So making sure that patients have access to the medication that they need has always been a driving force for me, and would be in my administration.
I appreciate you. Also, yeah, I'm glad you touched upon maintaining the integrity of the ATCs. This obviously goes hand in hand with each other. Yes, I've seen the programs from other state and how they work. Tim, Daryl, the whole board, we all have great ideas to support the potential legalization coming along with the, and also making sure maintaining the ATC's integrity and making sure they flourish too, because the difference between the recreational and the medical, in the when I speak to the dispensaries, I mean, they're to educate, make sure that the people are receiving the proper care. Granite Leaf definitely is. They have a great educational system there. And I've been a part of it for a while, and I just can't thank them enough for it. And I want other people to feel this this greatness of community and support that I've received. Right. So thank you.
If I could just follow up on that, I think there's some really good points about strengthening the ATCs and the fact that they have been operating and providing a service with no problems. A few other ways to strengthen them is to keep them tax-free as far as the products that they sell, make it easier to get cards, make it widely known how you get a medical card, because just to find out is jumping through a lot of hoops just to get the information. But also, I support anyone being able to grow homegrown, but let's start with the medical. If people can grow homegrown, if they get a medical card, that's going to keep people enrolled in the medical program. And like you say, the variety of products that they offer, if they can continue to offer both high strength and low strength in a variety of different forms, I think they can continue to survive. But they do need that recreational. If others are doing recreational, they need to have a counter or a separate door or whatever. Don't make it be a separate location like that bill that the Senate had. Was just crazy. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the impact on farmers and agriculture. I led an effort last fall to do a survey, worked with the Farm Bureau, with the Northeast Organic Farming Association, and received input from active farmers in the state, overwhelming support for legalization. The strongest support was for general home grow, but 78% of the respondents were interested in becoming licensed producers. So there is interest in the agricultural community to get into the especially craft cannabis market, like you see in Maine or Vermont, which is just thriving and really benefiting small farmers. So my question to you is, what kind of policies could you envision that would maximize opportunities for Granite State farmers to enter and participate and compete in a legal cannabis market?
Yeah, if there's an interest, and thank you for that statistic. I had no idea that the interest was so broad-based among the farming community. So I just want to go back a little bit to my experience as executive counselor. Again, I represent a lot of the farming community areas where the farms are in our state, and small farmers, and have been working with small farmers on issues like flooding and crop loss and the changes, the climate changes that are just really not being addressed by this administration. There's so many things that we should and could be doing to help farmers. We would definitely protect the conservation of land in current use, to protect our small farmers, et cetera. Specifically around cannabis, it does seem to me that as more and more people might be interested in making that change, that we should be working with the cooperative extension program to educate farmers about what opportunities they have in front of them, what products might do well in the environment. And that kind of touches on the fact of the question about whether we're going to do outside growing or not, right? Because right now the ATCs are growing inside, and it's an expensive model to grow inside with artificial light, right? And having to consume more energy. It makes for a more expensive end product. And so the question is, are we going to allow greenhouse growing, right? And I think that's a policy that I would be interested in looking at, how we're going to provide appropriate security, but at the same time, maybe allow for growing in a situation where we're not consuming unnecessarily excessive amounts of energy to do that. So those are a couple of them. I don't know quite honestly whether because I think, we have the federal limitations, obviously, on cannabis. I don't know whether there's any opportunity to extend crop loss insurance to a cannabis product when you have this federal limitations.
Hemp, but not cannabis.
Right. So I think that's going to continue to be a problem and a risk, less so, I guess, if you're growing inside and in a more controlled environment, but still one that, farmers in our state are really experiencing, taking on an excessive amount of risk right now due to the failure of our government to address climate change. And therefore that risk runs downhill to farmers, right? When you're dealing with that, and then the crop loss and a crop loss insurance that doesn't really adequately address the kind of farm to table or retail market that so many of our smaller farmers sell into direct to market rather than through wholesale. But I would be interested in hearing from you if there are specific policies that you think I should be thinking about and considering around beyond those that we're just talking about.
If I could just quickly, because I know there's other people with questions and comments, but a lot of states that have prioritized their farmers create multi-tier licensing systems so that it's very affordable for a small farmer to enter without betting the farm, so to speak. So for a small scale producer to pay a couple $100s for a license and get into the market, see how it works. So I think that's one, is to have different tiers for different types of growers, to structure the program to keep the multi-state operations from capturing the New Hampshire market, which essentially they will, unless it's structured to make sure that the owners are New Hampshire residents and have caps on the size and volume of the operations. So that's at the other end. One is an incentive to help the small grower, but like you say, education, getting extension involved, which right now they have not wanted to talk about it at all. So they're missing the boat. Other states are going full speed ahead with grower education. But the other thing would be allowing growers to sell direct. So some kind of farmer's market permit for cannabis sales, so that they don't, say if there's a state monopoly, what farmer in their right mind is going to grow for one buyer? Nobody. But if you have an opportunity to sell directly to consumers with tight controls, got to have testing for safety, for contaminants, etc. So there needs to be broadly available, affordable testing is another key to support this industry. And believe me, it is an industry. It's all kinds of support businesses that are stimulated. When I go to trade shows in Vermont or Maine, there's HVAC, there's packaging, there's security, there's insurance, there's bookkeeping. It's not just dispensaries and growers, but all these other businesses that it takes to support an actual industry. And that's what we're looking at, and that's what we're missing out on here.
Yeah, and I certainly think that, fundamentally farmers are the foundation, right? If we don't have product, then this whole program depends on making sure that we have the supply chain that we need to support the market. And so doing whatever we can to protect that market and to protect New Hampshire farmers in particular, in making sure that we prioritize New Hampshire farmers in this program. That's what I would want to see.
Thank you for your indulgence of my bad internet. And I think, Daryl, you started with Carrie.
Talked about you, Tim. We talked about all my efforts to bring broadband to the North Country.
That's another whole group I can get together for you. So it seems like you started with Carrie. We segued to Jim. Actually, I think Phil's question is very much a good segue from Jim. Phil?
Yeah. Carrie actually just sort of addressed, part of what I was going to talk about, but I may add a little tag to it. So I'm going to read my question, which you may have. Most states which have legalized adult use marijuana have debated the question of the limits on THC content. With this, while this seems like a simple enough issue, in fact, it's quite complicated, especially given the general high THC content of most commercial marijuana today. The high levels that medical users may require, as Carrie was suggesting, and other considerations. And I'm asking you what your position is on this. But I would add a little tag to that. I think we agree on what Carrie was suggesting. The medical users, might need higher content THC. But as an educator, and I think other people here as well, part of our concern is that after almost 100 years of the war on drugs, going back to the 1920s, there's been so much misinformation, mythology, I call them marijuana myths that exist, that are still out there. Because after 100 years of this being pounded into the public, people begin to, believe these things, even though the evidence does not support it. And one of them is, my favorite peeve is, this is not your grandfather's marijuana argument, that the marijuana today is much higher in THC than it's ever been before. And that simply is not true. And I always say Exhibit A is hashish, which has been around for at least 2,000 years, which can be anywhere from 30 to 80% THC. It's not that marijuana has never been this high. What, of course, is different is because of legalization, decriminalization, normalization. There's a lot of marijuana today. It's much more easily accessible. It's higher in THC. But it's not like it's been this high as like never before. So it's those kinds of myths. So we talked in the last hour or two about other marijuana myths, like marijuana causes psychosis. It does not. People who are susceptible to psychosis might have a psychotic effect with marijuana. They should be careful. But marijuana does not cause psychosis among the general public. Also, the argument that you always hear, if we legalize marijuana, there's going to be an uptick in young people consuming marijuana. And in fact, just the opposite has happened. In almost every state that is legalized, adult use, youth has gone down. So I would just, there's a lot of other marijuana myths out there as well. I'm happy to email them to you. But when people, bring up those questions, I hope you're able to, sort of bat them back with the facts.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not sure if it's this question or one of the questions really that raises this issue is, I mean, honestly, it becomes a public safety issue from my perspective. I mean, we hear so much about what the contamination is of the marijuana that is being purchased illegally on the streets. And essentially, when you legalize this market, you really take away that street sale, that market will dry up, right? And why most people aren't going to take the risk of buying something illegally that they can buy legally, and you eliminate the risk of all the pesticides, contaminants, whatever it could be. And we've even heard, I don't know, fentanyl, although I don't know why that happens, but that's in the marijuana that's on the streets. And also, once you eliminate that street black market, it makes it harder for teenagers and people who are underage to get access to the cannabis product. So I think that at least what I have seen, it supports what you're saying, that actually this decreases teenage use of cannabis products by legalizing marijuana. And I think you're absolutely right that there are a lot of myths out there that we will need to educate the public on, and that will have to be obviously part of any kind of a rollout program. I don't have any specific comments on what exactly I think THC levels should be. I don't even know that information. But I certainly hope to hear from the experts and work that out through whatever legislative process we see going forward to make sure that it's a level that, the stakeholders at the table all agree on and that makes sense in the marketplace. And again, just reiterate, protecting the medical use cannabis to make sure that patients are able to access the medication that they need.
I just wanted to add to what Jim was saying when he goes to these conferences, that educational programs are also on offer. including our own, people like Riley Kirk, who gives talks on education. So I think that's a really, really important part at all levels, at the public school levels, in colleges. I mean, I'm the director of a university level cannabis studies program. Riley Kirk does a similar kind of work at the university level, and that might be something you might consider as well. How your state university, your community colleges, state colleges, might think about educating people, not just on the health effects, potential dangers, but on getting jobs. I mean, Tim teaches our Cannabis course. We have a course on cannabis cultivation for young people in our system in Vermont who want to get into the business. We're always talking in the Northeast about how do we retain young people in our states. Well, here's one way: educate them into this industry that they are really excited about. And they will stay, and they will create businesses and employ people and pay tax dollars.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. I think somebody asked that question about young people, so I think we'll get to that.
Yeah. So 2 pieces of information. So Cinde, I can send you, there's a CDC study that talks about every state that has legalized adult use cannabis, underage use has gone down. So we gladly offer that data. I think at the top of the call, when you said you have a group of experts, we are pro-cannabis experts, and anyone that is a pro-cannabis legislator, we want to support with information. So feel free. I can send you anything that we discuss, and if you want to follow up. You did reference a question. Unfortunately, Kyle Savage, who's one of our healthcare board members, couldn't stay on for this call, but he did send you that question. That was one of the ones I sent last evening, which is, what's the potential impact, do you believe, that legalized cannabis would have on our population? And I know you referenced it a little bit, so let me just sort of restate it correctly. He said, if legalized recreational cannabis model were to come to fruition within the state of New Hampshire, what potential impacts do you believe it would have on the state from a population health standpoint?
Yeah, so I think we talked already about this, the decrease of usage in teenagers, right? And in the drying up of an illegal market where we don't know, the buyers don't know what is in the product that they're buying. So from a public safety perspective, I think that this makes sense. And from the certainly from medical use, making sure that as many people who need access can have access, and expanding qualified conditions, the list of qualifying conditions when science dictates and shows that medical science dictates that the patients will benefit from the use of medical use marijuana or cannabis. And I see I'm from the old school, still say marijuana once in a while. I also think that, making sure that we are treating that people who do have medical conditions aren't affected by the stigma and afraid to use the product when it is medically appropriate for them. And that is, part of educating the medical community and part of educating, patients. Everyone will make their own decisions about what they feel comfortable with, but we don't want some of those myths that Phil was talking about to be driving people's decisions. A lot of these issues are driven by the fact that we have somebody in the corner office that is leading with common sense and science, and not leading with politics. And that to me is, a lot of what I see at the council table and that I have to fight against is when we're putting, politics over people in our state. And that is part of what has happened here on this issue. So you need a governor who can talk about these issues in a way that isn't driven by the politics. I also want to be sensitive to the safety issues related to people that are impaired driving, and being sensitive to the public safety issues surrounding that, and wanting to hear, obviously, what law enforcement's thoughts are regarding that topic as well. But to be clear, I am an advocate of not putting our residents on the road to drive out of state to purchase product to come back into the state.
Right. Again, another one that I can send you, there's a great NHTSA study that I love to quote from 2019 that says that cannabis users, and it actually always, remember, I always have to state it. No one should drive under the influence of anything. But if they do, cannabis users drive slower, take less chances, leave more space between cars. Drivers under the use of alcohol take more chances, drive faster, and leave less space between cars. So we talked about agriculture, we've talked about education, we've talked about healthcare. Let's talk a little bit about the business side. So Darryl, do you want to start with your question?
Absolutely. And just to lay the groundwork, one of the frustrations I think we have is that the legislators seem to think that this is really a desire from the residents of the state around the issue of supply. We already have now 3 markets that serve New Hampshire: the illicit market, the medical market, and the legal ATCs on every border. So really what they're crying for is economic opportunity. And I think that the issue of structure, which is something I really had a deep dive in this last legislative session, the structure you pick directly affects the economic opportunity. And I think economic opportunity is one of the 3 foundational elements for cannabis legalization. We saw a few years ago the concept of the state running the stores, so being the business. I believe the franchise model was just that by proxy. We had an agency model, which you may be familiar with. We have some agency liquor stores in the state, so that was kind of a middle ground there. And then, of course, you have more of your traditional free market licensing model. So I just wanted to get some thoughts for you of how you would approach the structure of a cannabis industry in the state of New Hampshire.
Yeah, so I haven't reached any conclusions on this, but this is one of those places where I am happy to listen to what everyone has to say about this. I think that the federal government's position and the risk that goes along with states being overly involved, tied to this industry and what could happen from a federal perspective if there's, a crackdown there, I think weighs heavily in the decision to make some separation, right, between the state and this point of sale here. Beyond that, I don't think that limiting, I didn't even begin to understand the logic of limiting the distribution centers to 15 in the state of New Hampshire. I just don't even understand that. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. And so that then gets you to, I think, what is being called either the agency model or more free market models. And I'm happy to hear from all sides about the pluses and the minuses of that. And I think now that we have so many other states that are participating in various markets, we have some experience that we could draw on to make sure that we get it right in New Hampshire. But I mean, clearly understanding that that doesn't mean, from my perspective, that we're slowing down. I mean, we need to get this done. It is frustrating to me that we are, if you're just talking from, a business economic perspective, you've got a market that's maturing right now, right? You've got a market where people are developing those kinds of patterns to drive out of state to purchase this product. And, we all know how hard it is to change consumer behavior, right? And so we're late to the game, and we're now going to be having to disrupt established patterns that people have developed. Some of them they'll be happy to give up on. They may be driving a long distance, some of them not, right? And so you're then making it harder to compete in this marketplace than, obviously if you were first to the market instead of last. And we're having to reverse those trends. And, what we're, historically, what we have done in New Hampshire is actually bring people over our border, right, to, purchase liquor products, for instance. And we have exactly the opposite situation going on here. So in speaking with the Director Malika at the Liquor Commission about this over time, you know, I have asked, what do you think the revenue to the state will be? You know, he's estimating, I think, based on what both Maine and Vermont are doing, of somewhere in the 200 to 300 million dollar range, with what 15% of that may be coming back to the state in terms of revenue. 15, I'm not exactly sure exactly what the number is, but you know, you're talking, you know, maybe 30 to 20 to 45 million if you're in that 10 to 15% range. And this is a market we shouldn't be missing out on. You know, our neighboring states are doing it, and we should be engaged in this as well. I'm not sure if I've addressed all of your concerns, but basically I'm listening to hear what exactly the right model is, but let's get it right so that we are actually making sure that we are in this marketplace, that we are competing, that we are addressing safety concerns in terms of, you know, the product, and that we are also properly regulating and taxing.
And I would say just one recommendation you might take, which is, you know, I always encourage people to think of us as more, look to the future and think of us as more than just another cultivator, processor, retailer. To everybody's point, want to attract and retain the next generation of youth and entrepreneurship. For years, I've had people who are in cannabinoids and nanotechnology move to Maine, move to this, the extraction technologies, all of this. So setting, I think, the foundation for that would bring a lot more money into the state coffers through research and technology and development and all these sorts of things. So just something we like to get people thinking about is not just kind of the blinders of that initial launch, but what we might be able to actually build around that industry to maybe be a hub for all of that sort of thing.
Well, thank you for that. It's always enlightening to hear how much is behind a business. I think, Jim, I think you already referred to that this is an industry, right? There's a lot more underneath this industry than just what you see at the retail level.
And if I could just jump in briefly, just one other regulatory model that is used by Washington, D.C., and that is they built out their medical program, make it easy to get a medical card. And that way it's still tightly regulated by the state, but there's a carve out in federal legislation for state medical programs. There's no carve out for recreational, which is what I'm hearing you say, that's very risky from a legal basis. But we could be creative and say we have an industry already that's successful, that's been problem-free, and let's really run with it and add in the medical home grow, but and they would be the source of plants and seeds and inputs, etc. But build out more of our medical as the basis for the industry.
Build out the medical, but I also support the recreational.
Yes, but medical becomes recreational. It's just a different way of thinking of things.
Riley, you had a comment?
Oh yeah, just real quick, just about the cannabis being more, it's an industry, kind of this whole big thing. I think nobody has that much of a problem if the state's involved in some way, but the state having monopoly is not what people are comfortable with, because a lot of cannabis is built on the culture, the industry, the people who have been here before there was any, you know, route to buy it through a dispensary or a store. So maintaining that culture, and people are really proud of their products. They want to show the face behind it, and giving people an avenue to do that that's not state regulated and people can really shine through their product. I think it also creates more intention with the actual product that you're using, and just like more respect for the medicine if we can connect it back to the grower and back to the plant.
Thank you.
Like a winery. Think of it that way.
Right. Like they want to know that like that's their wine. They want people to be like, see their winery and tour and taste a grape and be part of the entire process.
Like craft beer.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big trend, Cinde, in the industry to refer to certain products as craft cannabis, right? Where it's locally grown, it's locally sort of loved and given attention, and it builds a sense of community like a craft brewer does, like a winery does.
Yeah, you know, obviously with you know, the kind of safety concerns that we've talked about, right? And we are wanting to put appropriate protections for public safety, but yes.
Most definitely. I don't think any of us here are sort of purists in the legal and let anything happen. Everything has, there's to be some controls and some limitations. And I think, that's an important part of this. So I want to be respectful of the time. So I have one question which sort of segues a little bit towards workforce. So I'll just read it. So New Hampshire is one of the top 3 states in the country that its median age of residents is getting older. Do you believe that legalized recreational cannabis would allow for New Hampshire to attract and retain younger, more diverse professionals to add to its workforce? We know we have a workforce issue.
Yes. Okay, well, we have a workforce issue. That means we don't have enough workforce. we have lots of jobs and lots of opportunity, and we can attract workforce for a whole host of reasons. But when your question fundamentally around the aging of our state, it's sometimes frustrating for me to sit there at the council table and hear the governor just make a statement like, well, we're an aging state. Like, are we going to do anything about that? Are we going to stop burdening our students with the highest student debt in the country so that are we going to make our higher education system, funded in a way that our students can stay here and not pay less money to go out of state tuition somewhere else than to here? Are we going to put broadband across the state because young people aren't going to live anywhere where there's no broadband? Are we going to increase our cell phone service? Are we going to actually address the housing crisis so that young people can afford to stay here and that we can have workforce? Are we going to stop closing maternity wards so that we create maternity deserts? It's hard to build families in maternity deserts. People don't go there. Are we going to make sure we have great public education systems so that this is a great place to raise a family? There are so many issues around keeping young people, and this is certainly one. I don't know. I mean, you can tell me. I think, Daryl, you just said you've seen people leave the state because the job opportunities took them elsewhere. This is the good new information for me. Thank you. I don't know how much it attracts people, but I think that having a situation where we're actually, not making it difficult for people, young people, to stay here, not imposing these legal limitations on them, that they are actually doing something that's illegal in our state, and that I think certainly is important.
Two very quick things on that, Cinde, that might help. Over 15 years ago, one of my first friends had come to me and said, I'm going to Maine. Something's happening up there. That's how long. It might even been more than that. And I think to dovetail with the conversation, in 2020, I think the average price of a home in the state of New Hampshire was somewhere around, say, $360,000, $385,000. And July 9th, there was another report that it has gone up to $538,000. And that was the 4th straight month of setting a new record. And these are the types of things that are driving people out or keeping them away. So I do think it's all related.
It's all related. All of this is all interrelated. And you probably all know that housing is a cornerstone of issue for my campaign. It has been largely neglected and ignored throughout this Sununu administration, leaving us 60,000 units behind. So many, and I know that's not the topic of the day, but they are all interrelated, and the ability to bring in the workforce that we need is limited by the ability of people to find a place to live.
That is part of it, and that's why in the last bill you saw funds being set aside for municipal water and sewage expansion, for an agency that guarantees certain parts of development loans, all of those things. So no, it is a part of it for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, we understand that cannabis in itself is not a solution to a lot of our economic issues, but what it does is it does cross over into a variety of those. When I talk to people outside of New England, even out of New England, and they're, oh, New Hampshire, live free or die, and you always are at the top of the list on quality of life. Yet you don't have local cannabis, isn't for those that are interested in quality of life, outdoor recreation, are predominantly cannabis, or more likely to be cannabis users, and then how do we live up to the live free or die when we have, when we're the outpost for prohibition within 6 New England states? Those are things that then become a tourism problem. And what I mean by that is I'll hear from folks that say, hey, I'm going to come skiing in New Hampshire. Oh, you don't have legal cannabis there. I'll go spend 2 days in Vermont first and then 2 days in New Hampshire. So now I'm splitting my tourism dollar up where I used to just center it into the state. So these are things that definitely tie back to a variety of our economic issues. I want to give you an opportunity to have the last word here, Cinde, because we really do appreciate your time. I don't know if you had any other closing thoughts.
I guess I want to say how much I appreciate you, spending the time with me to give me your thoughts on how you think this market should evolve, and recommit that to me, this should be happening in our state. I'm frustrated that it hasn't happened before now. I think it's important that we legalize recreational marijuana, properly regulated and taxed, and respecting the safety issues, and also making sure that we have robust markets and that we understand the impacts all the way up and down the supply chain, from the farmers to the retail market, and then as beyond, as you've so accurately described. I look forward to leading on this issue from the corner office, and let's get it done. And I guess reiterating my protection again of the medical use cannabis in our state. So, thank you.
Yeah. We appreciate your time. If any of our members can be of any help to you in your campaign in terms of information, you just reach out. I'm glad to share their information. If you're okay with that, I can share Donnie's email with our board. For those that have thoughts. Again, Cinde Warmington, thanks so much. I can say I forgot the most important thing in my introduction. Cinde is my executive counselor, so I'm very happy to have gotten to know her.
I'm getting you broadband. I just want you to know that.
For the love of God, Cinde, please.
I'm at the coffee shop, so I could actually have a cogent Zoom call. Otherwise, if I was at home, Daryl and Phil know this quite well because I have numerous calls with them on different capacities. I probably would have dropped out about 17 times and run and hid in the corner. So
T1 line straight to his house.
Cinde Warmington.